Well, hey folks, it's your old pal King Waspinator. Welcome back to Total Party Skills. Do you remember that video I made a few weeks ago, Wizards of the Coast Aren't Stewards? It was a video that kind of, at least by my channel's standards, actually went semi-viral. Racked up a bunch of views in a relatively short amount of time and got me a ton of subscribers. You possibly are one of the new viewers. Hi, thanks for subscribing. Hopefully you won't unsubscribe over this one, but you might, because I'm going to talk about that subject that so many people say, please don't drag that into this, even though everyone kind of is always on the edge of wanting to drag it into things. They just don't want to have to listen to people disagreeing with them. And that is, of course, politics. Now, I've alluded before, I kind of really don't know where I fall anymore. On paper, if you take one of those political survey polls that they put out during election years, that'll either like put yourself on the 4-point political compass, or the ones that are like, which party's policies do you best align with, and so on and so forth. Well, according to that, I'm like 99% in line with the Green Party when it comes to policy type stuff. And on the political 4-point compass, I'm like all the way at the furthest left line and just slightly on the libertarian side of the libertarian authoritarian divide. Further left than Mao, according to that. However, I have doubts about the whole thing. I don't think it's possible to have an honest appraisal of my own, or like a lot of you might not actually have the political position that you've been taught that you have. Because the fundamental problem with all these surveys and political compasses is the questions they're choosing to ask and the limitations of their pre-written answers that go along with them. It boxes everybody into this perception that, like, oh, you can have all this variety between these 4 different things. But we live in an infinite universe. There's actually infinite positions to potentially be taken. Like a lot of these questions like don't even necessarily apply to anything going on in my life or my thinking. There's all sorts of things they could be asking in these sorts of questionnaires to determine my own political position that I find they're not asking at all. They're not asking for my opinion on a lot of things. For a long time through my adult life, I've largely been aligned with left political stuff. I still tend to find that even to this day, as much as I've come to despise the Democrat Party, if push comes to shove, I'd probably be forced to have to side with them just on policy basis, because they're not so much trying to write things from a position of biblical authority, which to me is what the real difference between the left and the right is. I think the whole idea of the political line between left and right, I think, is wrong. It's not really a perfect line. At the end of the right wing, it comes to a fine point, and that fine point is theocracy, rule by the fiat of Almighty God, and whatever particular flavor of that you want to believe in. On the left, the line starts to fray apart, and you have a whole bunch of different kinds of left expressions that can come to their own points, and they all don't like each other, and they all tend to see each other as right-wing. For the most part, the actual honest theocrats have largely been pushed out of the political conversation, and what we have right now is a bunch of different penultimate leftist ideas all attacking each other for not being the right kind of left. Irony, of course. Pun intended, or unintended. You decide. If I were forced to have to come up with some way of describing my own, I guess, political philosophy outside of these, limited choice A through D and none of the above kind of framework that everything's, built around because of standardized testing and how political polling works and just the fundamental ideas that drive political science and all that kind of stuff. If I were forced to have to actually really try to nail down what I am outside of all that, I would call myself, I had it a little while ago. Situational discretion is what I believe in. Different situations require different solutions, and you should allow yourself the flexibility to be able to do whatever is the optimal outcome for anything that comes up. I think So much of our political discussion and political framing and political divides are us fighting yesterday's battles, often over things that have already been decided, and yet for some reason we are just incapable of letting these things go. It's like we're all pre-World War II France, and our political parties are our own little Maginot lines, and we like to get in our trenches and yell back and forth at each other. But, at some point, some unforeseen entity with tanks could easily just drive over our Maginot lines. But and then where are we going to be? But we're because we're so focused on arguing over the past, we very much blind ourselves to situations as they emerge. And so we're always legislating to fix yesterday's problems. If something bad happened, then we do something about it afterwards. But that still leaves us unprepared for the next unforeseen thing. And obviously you can't foresee the unforeseen, but you can leave yourself a bit more prepared to handle it if you're not locking yourself into some mental framework where everything has to be conservative, or everything has to be liberal, or everything has to be communist. And when answering those kinds of questionnaires, since they're not really asking me questions that I would want to have asked of me, and the answers don't always match exactly what I would myself actually answer if asked that question of what I think about X, you end up having to apply a different selection process to determine what answers you're giving. The default thing for a lot of people is, well, which team do you like the best? And you just kind of fall in line with that team's checklist. And all that ends up serving is to distort to leadership what people are actually like. They all feel that they have a much larger depth of support in terms of their policy beliefs than what they actually have. And people themselves, because of various team dynamics and the desire to win and tribalism and the way both sides kind of demonize the other side to make sure they keep their followers in their camp, you kind of slowly trick yourself into thinking that these standardized answers are what you actually think, when they might not actually be. And I don't know. I took a year of political science in college before I decided not to take student loans and not get massively in debt. So most of it was just introductory courses and some stuff on Eastern European history. But it immediately poisoned me to the whole thing. You're actually starting to just even get the barest beginnings of a peek of what's really going on underneath the hood. These political parties are themselves evil mega corporations, and the thing that they're selling is political access. And they need you to think that the other side of the country is the worst thing that's ever happened, and they're coming for you. They're coming for you and your kids. Because they can't afford you to ever vote for the other side, because in order for them to keep getting money from their customers, they have to be able to guarantee results. And so, you're wanting someone to fund your local district state representative. You got to make sure you can these people are actually going to give you money. You got to make it seem like there's some sort of assurance that that money's not going to go to waste, that this person's going to get elected. And if you can back that up by saying, oh well, our demographics in this region of the state is 80% Team X, and that they're all basically been hyper conditioned to be in continuous fear and anger at us other regular people. One of the funny things about moving out here to the country where I grew up is my citified roommates and wife who got dragged out here. And some of, particularly with our roommate, less so with my wife. But the conceptions of people who've spent their entire lives in cities or come from California and stuff like that, and how they have this idea of what things are going to be like out here, and then kind of having to slowly dawn on them that actually, out in the country, everyone's way friendly. You're much more likely to have a positive interaction with somebody working at a restaurant or a gas station or at a grocery store than you are to have in a city. Everyone in the city is just so inundated with so many people, and just basically you're kind of conditioned to try to kind of keep your head down. Because, there's plenty of people to replace you, and regardless of whatever the situation is, whether it comes from romantic relationships all the way to holding your job, you better keep your fucking head down, because you can be replaced. Out here, that kind of pressure doesn't really seem to exist. You can be yourself. You have your own space. And you're not so, like, crushed by constant customer demand that, you can actually afford to be friendly and have a nice conversation with your UPS driver or the old lady at the gas station. It's such a different thing. And yet, though, to hear how people present, you'd think going up into the heart of East Texas, it would just be this, like, you just see nooses hanging from every tree, and there's just gigantic Trump flags flying everywhere, and there's just giant Klan rallies in the middle of town. And, like, none of that's real. Everyone gets along actually surprisingly well out here. I'm sure everyone's got their differences and things they don't like, but, there is kind of also just kind of a general philosophy out here in the sticks of, mind your own fucking business, and I won't mind yours either, kind of a thing. It's not as nosy overall than what you get in the big cities. And unfortunately, a lot of what this political rift is can also be traced down to a very old and ancient divide between city folk and rural folk. It goes all the way back to the dawn of what we call civilization. In some ways, I feel like I've grown kind of past the idea of the stuff that both the left and the right are trying to promote as being, like ideal political options. I'm tired of it. It's too backwards focused. It's all suspect because of all the money involved. It's all bullshit. They both lie to their constituents. And just do all the same tricks. They're all woke. And I feel in some ways a wish that we could almost just go back to just being a bunch of little city-states in a world where you're allowed to vote with your feet again. Either that or just be honest empire. I'd rather us go back to proper empire than neo-feudalism. Neo-feudalistic civilizations are so navel-gazing and selfish. Empires, we wouldn't have any idea of a cosmopolitan, integrated, multi-ethnic lifestyle if it weren't for empires in the first place. I think empires are the ones that themselves get a bad rap. But instead, the world is still just kind of hung up on what is a bunch of, like, Germanic ideas. I know I have a few Germans in my audience, and this is not directed at you personally, obviously, but good Lord, how many totalitarian, authoritarian political philosophies has spilled out of German political science for the world to, like, still be wrestling over centuries later? Like, are we ever allowed to get tired of that? I don't know. I feel like not so much neo-feudalism. We need to, like, have some sort of neo-Bronze Age kind of revival. Something a bit closer to, like, natural humanity than what we've experienced in a couple thousand years now. I don't know. As always with my videos, there's probably no point to any of this, but be sure to hit like and subscribe anyway. Or unsubscribe. I'm certain I've said something that will alienate somebody, and God forbid you have to ever listen to something that you don't want to agree with. That would be terrible. So yeah, I guess that's about it. Until next time, stay politically energized and uptight.